Welcome, everyone, to the Sister Science podcast. I am here with Chelsey Beda, so you know it's going to be a juicy one. Chelsey and I today are going to talk about guiding people on how to move from their own sovereignty, how you actually can connect to and live from a place that is authentic and real and following your own internal wisdom. It's a big ask in our culture. So, Chelsey, kick us off for us. Can you explain in more detail what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So every one of us gets conditioned by our culture, the culture that we live in. And you could really think about it like yogurt, right? We have yogurt and you have like the good bacteria in the yogurt. But if the yogurt expires, it's starting to build some of that bad bacteria and it's not good anymore. And all culture has a little bit of good bacteria and a little bit of bad, and some more than others, and some fully, more on one side than others.
Yeah,
And you could think of culture as like the environment that you live in and grow up in, and it kind of becomes a part of you. You merge with it a little bit. It's not you, but it highly influences who you are and who you're becoming, or who you were in the past,
absolutely.
right? And so you could think of culture like a social construct of the collective unconscious. It's these agreements that we've made in our unconscious together, and it's the rules that we kind of play by and abide by from that unconscious agreement.
It's funny, I heard a metaphor around this recently that talked about the game of chess and how there's
Mhm.
rules about the pawn can only move to this spot and the knight can move to that spot and this one's allowed to move this way and the queen, each pawn, each piece of the chessboard is allowed to have different actions.
Yeah.
And the game has rules.
Mhm.
But really, as long as both parties play by the rules, the game goes on perfectly. But you could also look at that chessboard and you can play it however you wanted. You could make up a new game. You could invent new rules. You could let all the pieces have all the different ways of moving. And it's only because we've learned the rules and we agree by the rules that's the game that gets played. But we could play a
Mhm.
completely different game if we allowed the rules to change.
Yes. And so the first step of like stepping in your own kind of self-sovereignty and being able to kind of like move and operate from that place is realizing that, you know, we are in a game in a way.
Hmm.
It is a game, and recognizing that the programming of the culture might not necessarily actually align with what you value, where your morals lie in your heart and in your body, and even boiling it down to like aesthetics as well. Like there is a lot of things that um, kind of go in our culture that might not really feel you, right? And so the first step is recognizing the patterns that exist within your culture. And one of the easiest ways to kind of do this is travel to a different culture and see how they have different beliefs and they have different ways of operating. For myself, I really got a glimpse of what this was like when I was hiking the PCT, and there was probably 30% of the hikers were European. And in
Mhm.
Europe, people get 6 to 8 weeks of vacation a year. And some people bank that vacation, and they had 6 months of vacation banked. In North America, no one could even fathom that.
Yeah.
Unless
It's
you work for yourself or you're pretty well to do, right?
mhm. And it's a privilege almost to be able to travel. And it does bust open. It busts open the world and it lets you be able to see that, oh, I just believe that because that's what I've learned. And once you get
Mhm.
exposed to other ways of doing things and seeing that other people find their way completely normal the same way you find your way completely normal.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, it's important. Okay, so travel, recognizing the patterns in your culture.
Yeah. And you know, there's other ways of doing this without traveling too, like reading books from different cultures, from like different cultural perspectives, even like religion and philosophy of different cultures. Like they it's really eye-opening. If and again, you want to choose something that aligns with you that you're interested in,
So, like, if I
right?
was going to think about me right now, I'd be like
Mhm.
yoga and Ayurveda because
Right.
both of these modalities just busted open a belief system that I had and really shifted me to be able to examine my beliefs and go, that's so interesting. And
Hmm.
be able to I don't know, keep the ones that feel very valuable and solid and nourishing for me, but then examine, be able to release the ones that kind of keep me stuck.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and it revolutionized how you did things, right? But it was over time. It didn't happen in a day, right?
No.
You immersed yourself in the culture of yoga and Ayurveda over the course of years.
Yeah.
Because when we come to our like deep conditioning of culture, whether it's, you know, from the country you live in, the family you originated from, you know, the schools of thought that you've, you know, paid for and got degrees in, it takes time. You need that immersion. You need to immerse yourself in it to get to know it on a cellular level, right? You can know it in your mind, but
Yeah.
knowing it in your mind is just like a regurgitation and a parroting. If it isn't embodied, you haven't been cultured.
Yeah, and you look at the paradigm of how we've been cultured, you know, like they talk about the education system where basically it's just teaching kids to respond to bells and switch
Mhm.
gears, things like that, so we can prepare this little workforce for factory work.
Yeah.
Like these little kids, like just
Yeah.
program them so that when they're adults, they feel like they can go into that sort of corporate setting where the same thing happens, you know. There's going to be something that happens at the top of each hour. There's going to be a change that happens. You're going to need to go to a new meeting, or, you know, your break will happen at this time, and all this sort of stuff where our education system it acculturates people for the workforce.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. And that was like the entire purpose of school.
Yeah.
For me, I homeschooled my kids for a big chunk of time. And part of it was my kids just didn't fit into the school system. I had a kid who he was like self-harming, like he was hitting his head on the walls. He was really frustrated. He had a teacher, he we went to like a small Christian school and they had the same teacher for 3 years in a row and the same kids in the same class. And so some really negative patterns started to come out where there was, you know, there's like favoritism and also like kids can be mean. Like
Yeah.
that's just a thing, right? And so once I brought him home, that first year, we mostly just read books.
Yeah.
We read a lot of books from all different cultures around the world. And opening up that time frame without bells ending when that creative process, you know, should be
Yeah.
terminated, basically, just letting it open ended and then allowing him to kind of like use his nose to follow his interests. We opened like a whole new world of existence, and the self-harming like fell away. And the
Yeah.
self-deprecating words just like disappeared, which was pretty phenomenal for me. And it was like a big risk because there's a lot of not so much now, but then especially like it was like 15 years ago, um like saying like your kids won't have any social skills. But the
Mhm.
truth is, like, when you're involved in a homeschooling community, there's a lot of socializing with kids of different ages. I find my kids are actually a lot more social than the kids, and this isn't the case for all homeschoolers. There are some weird awkward homeschoolers, but
There's some weird awkward
yeah,
mainstream
they
kids.
they talk to people of all ages and they continue to do so today. And so that was like a big, that didn't just teach my kids, that taught me that like, whoa, if we kind of do something countercultural, which takes some effort, you can open up a whole new world that can actually be a lot more, not just productive, but
Authentic.
authentic, but it's also this beautiful, like
Easeful.
easeful discovery. And it's like
Mhm.
a place where you can like grow and expand from a firm foundation, right? That isn't created by someone else dictating who and what you can be with and what you can learn, right?
You've just said two things that were really interesting to me there. And one is that it's a risk. And I think about that in terms of our sense of belonging. When we come in to try and own our own sovereignty, and
Hmm.
we're doing things that are countercultural, or we're going to learn about, how other people in the world do it, but then we're trying to maybe bring some of those ideas into our own life inside of the cultural uh, petri dish or yogurt
Hmm.
that we're currently in. There's a risk, and that
Hmm.
risk is your belonging. And there is
Hmm.
something that is innate in us around wanting to feel a part of and wanting to feel like we belong. And so there's something in coming into your own sovereignty around balancing that risk of belonging with the desire for that discovery, growth, expansion, like that delicious unfurling and blooming. Because, yeah, there's sort of the scales tip there. And sometimes going in one direction tips you, and you feel like you're not quite as safe, possibly. Am I
Hmm.
describing
Hmm.
that okay?
Yes. Yeah. I want to say, I agree with everything you said. Brene Brown has a quote around belonging, and I'm not going to be able to quote it properly, but basically it goes something along the lines of this. We think of belonging as like being part of a group and having this like general acceptance. But when we belong to a part of a group and we allow that to define who we actually don't belong. That's not the true meaning of belonging. The true meaning of belonging is to belong to yourself. And so when we allow the definitions of a group to define us, we have to mask kind of our true authenticity because we each are our own like individual ice cream flavor, I want to say, and to actually like do some self-discovery and dive into what that is takes courage because it it requires you to step aside from those group dynamics and those group definitions and explore possibilities outside of what that is and what is true for you. And so when you start doing that process, it can be really vulnerable, um, but it is 100% worth the journey. For myself, before I went on the PCT, I was doing some deep exploration through journaling, and there were some feelings that were coming up inside of me that were like really, I want to say, taboo. But feelings aren't necessarily who you are, right? They're not who you are, and they might not even be true. And so, in my journaling self discovery, I decided to not let any taboo feeling that felt wrong and socially unacceptable to stop me from exploring it.
Hmm.
And this was probably the most courageous thing I've ever done. And so I wrote it down, and I, as I was writing it and exploring this like really scary thing, like I wouldn't want anyone to read that paper for the shame that I would feel if they read that paper. And as I was exploring it, I realized that thing that was so taboo that I thought was me actually wasn't me at all. It was just a fear.
Yeah.
And the fear was an illusion. And
Yeah.
I didn't know it was an illusion until I faced it and walked through it.
Ooh, you're giving me goosebumps.
Mm.
Um, so I want to just keep our progress here. So A, like the very first step is almost recognizing the pattern. Do you think
Mhm.
that this second piece is the courage, the risk, the vulnerability to actually look? Like, what
Mhm.
is would you say
Mhm.
that's kind of, yeah,
Yeah, and you can't look by just telling yourself the story in the mind. The mind can be a liar.
yeah.
Like we tell ourselves so many stories, right? Like our minds, they're amazing tools. They're really good. They're meant for measuring things. And they're meant for like being mirrors for your friends and your family and kind of being like a guiding voice, right? But when it comes to ourselves, especially in the human design world, our minds are not meant for making decisions. And in our culture, like it is preached time and time again, like you got to use your mind, think about it first. But it
Mhm.
doesn't, when you think about things, it doesn't incorporate that body, heart, mind wisdom, right? And
Yeah.
so to process kind of like, you know, those things that we fear, you need, everybody's going to do this a little bit differently. You need a mirror, something that's like tactile, not just of the mind. So that could be journaling. It could be talking with a trusted friend. It could be talking with a guide or a counselor. It could be talking with your partner. It could be through art, sometimes like poetry, like songwriting, music. There's something about making something that's intangible tangible through the senses.
Mhm.
It can mirror back what that felt sense is, right? Same
Yes.
with our relationships.
So here's where I I find an interesting question is because I don't feel like we have created a society where a mirror is a safe and easy thing to find. And I feel like if I was going to contrast, like I'm going to use the word dynamic group and static group. And a
Mhm,
static group is almost what we're talking about. It's like you've been given a job description, you've been given a role, we've given you all these labels, like you're in grade 3 in so and so's class, and this is math. Like there's
mhm, mhm,
real construct, a real container around what you're allowed to do in this box. And as adults, the same thing. You are now a mom, and as a mom, or as a mom and a wife,
mhm.
this is your set of expectations, and it works
This
best
is
for
selfish. This is
everyone.
not selfish.
Yes, it works best for everyone if you just follow the job description.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
we can find that a lot of the relationships and the communities that we belong to in our culture are quite static, where we're there with a role, a job description, a definition, and
mhm.
it works best for everyone if we just follow that. And
Exactly.
yes, and what we need in order to be able to have these mirrors is dynamic groups or dynamic
Yes.
relationships,
Yeah.
ones where you can show up differently.
Mhm,
You want to try something new? Cool. Let's see what happens. Where there's more of that, the way you described it when you brought your kid home and you were just reading, you were like, there was discovery, there was growth, there was
mhm,
expansion, there was curiosity, like we were
mhm,
just sort of
mhm,
following the goodness. You can just imagine kids outside playing, building forts and stuff, and they're not
mhm,
like they have no idea what at the beginning of the day, they have no idea what they're doing by the end of the day, but somehow
mhm,
they
mhm,
fill that day with just this precious fun
mhm,
exploration. And that's
mhm,
what we need to create is safe dynamic groups with
mhm,
growth mindsets, with deep listening skills,
mhm,
with the ability to sort of uh, call each other out, but also do it with
mhm,
incredible kindness and compassion, um, and then just sort of keep bringing people back when they fall
mhm,
back into the stuckness. No, you're
mhm,
come on, grow with me.
mhm.
That we need to create those mirrors.
So the mirrors exist in everything too, right? So we need to create those mirrors for ourselves so we can get the feedback that we need. But ultimately, it comes down to yourself and what you feel on the inside, right? So, and I love how when you're talking about how everything is like in our culture is meant to be static, but the truth is in nature, nothing is static. Everything is moving, everything is cyclical, even like rocks, okay? They look static, okay? But the atoms inside them, they're vibrating. Nothing is static. Nothing in the universe is static. And so that is our number one cultural problem right there, is to think that things are permanent. Nothing is permanent. And so it's actually the invitation is if you want to feel alive, you need to step into that dynamic version of yourself that makes you feel alive. And so for someone who's been stuck in a role and is maybe unaware of the patterns, but really wants to feel alive again, because I feel like we all want to feel alive.
Mhm.
Um, Human design is a great structure to that uses your birth date to create a chart that shows how your energy best works. And again, it's a structure. Everything in life, take with a grain of salt. If something doesn't resonate with you, I want you to let it go. Okay. But for me, I've found it to be a great tool and I've used it with many people in my life and it's been highly resonant. And so there's 5 different types of um, auras in the human design chart. And so that's kind of the energy, not only that you give off your aura, but also it has like a strategy on how to really get in touch with your own sovereign self authority.
I love this because I
Mhm,
think that part of being able to break out is giving some, and this is, I go back to Brene Brown, the way you did with the word belonging. I go back to that, her idea of when we can give something language, when we can
mhm,
give our brain sort of an explanation of why this is important and how it works, then all of a sudden it's like that fear-based brain stands down a bit.
mhm,
Find it
mhm,
in Ayurveda for me, when I move through Ayurveda, the language of it gives my brain, it's like, okay, I understand this now. And because I understand this, I can stand down and have a little bit of trust. And you're
mhm,
offering us another lens, this human design lens that
mhm,
it gives you understanding of yourself. And through that language and meaning,
mhm,
there's more acceptance of the pieces of you that perhaps aren't integrated, perhaps have been denied, perhaps have
mhm,
been, there are things about you that you know, but you don't know
mhm,
why you know. You've never been taught to listen or trust them. And now
mhm.
here comes something delivered on a silver platter, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
So, in a human design chart, it is loosely correlated with the chakra system,
Okay.
except for one difference. The heart center is divided in two. There's a G center and then a will center. And so you'll see these little shapes in the design, and some are defined, which they be colored in, and some are not. And so they would be white. Okay. And so this visual just gives you a like a visual of where your energy kind of lies, how it works, what chakras are um, colored in, are defined for you, where you have access to energy um, on a consistent basis. And then the ones that are open, you don't. But the ones that are open, you have 2 things happen. One, you're a little bit more easily conditioned in these areas because they are open. It's like an open window. But on the flip side, you have this great wisdom because you don't have a consistency on how your energy operates there. And so I want to say like these open windows are really um the lessons that you're bringing to the table and the wisdom you're gaining in this lifetime, because you're kind of tapping into that every day.
Okay, I just need to get some clarity here.
Mhm,
So we have sort of the way energy flows through the body. There's
mhm,
gates or there's areas that are open, and these
mhm,
areas are where we're still possibly learning. We're still influenced. We're still not fixed in our belief system, or
mhm.
perhaps we are,
So, okay,
but
we're gonna
the
stop. We're gonna
cultural.
rewind. We're gonna rewind.
Okay,
It doesn't have to do with beliefs. It
okay,
has to do purely with energy. Okay. Everyone's going to have their beliefs regardless.
okay,
Um, and so, in the areas that are defined, you have a consistent access to energy and a consistent way you do things.
okay.
That's it. Okay. And then the open ones, you just don't. You don't have a consistent way your energy operates out of those chakras. We're going to just call them chakras. We don't really use that term in human design, but everyone kind of understands what a chakra is. So, that's how I'm going to just say it now for for the people who've never seen the human design chart.
Okay.
And
I
so
love
there's
it.
5 types of auras.
Okay.
75 or 70% of the population is a generator type. And that type is split into two: pure generators and manifesting generators. And the generator type is a emanating aura, an enveloping aura. So it's one of these expansive auras. If you're around generators, you'll kind of feel it wrap around you, whether you want to or not. It's not a choice. It's just how it is.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And
And so they have a defined sacral. And a defined sacral means they have a really creative life building energy, and they are here to build things and build things based on what turns them on in life. Okay. What gives you satisfaction? What makes you feel like that is so good, right? That is where you're going to feel your satisfaction and kind of the direction you're meant to go. And when you're not feeling it, when you're kind of on the wrong path, or maybe in the wrong environment, or not with the right people, or maybe not making the right choices for yourself, you're going to be hitting walls and feeling really frustrated, and your energy is going to tank.
my gosh, you're telling me 70% of our population falls under this. I mean, I know
Yes.
this is my category right here.
Yeah.
And so it makes so much sense. If 70% of our population is meant to have this expansive energy, creative life building force where there's dharma, purpose in them
Hmm.
that they're meant to sort of be living from. And
Hmm.
then we put them into this box where it's like, no, 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 no. In half an hour, the bell's going to ring and you have to go do something different. Or in 15 minutes, your meeting has changed and this is the topic. And we put everyone into sort of this rigid system that
Hmm.
doesn't allow that sort of go build forts in the forest if that's what turns you on kind of idea.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Hmm.
we definitely haven't built a culture where generators can flourish. Okay. Tell us what the
Hmm.
second one is.
Okay. So the second one would be projectors. Projectors have a penetrating aura, and projectors are here to guide others, and they have an open sacral center. And so they are very creative people, and they will feel the urge um, to want to be a generator typically. But they're really here to guide other people, and they have this really amazing wisdom. And when you are around projectors and like it's a reciprocal relationship, when they kind of penetrate you with their energy, it feels like they see you to your core.
Oh gosh.
And they can kind of see the inner workings, and like they have like really good ways of directing you, especially when you're in those kind of platforms in life where you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
So a projector would be a really good friend to find for your mirror,
Hmm.
to mirror
Hmm.
yourself back. I have a
Hmm.
projector kid.
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah.
And
But where they can, so their signature is the invitation. So they need to be invited, and not just to just anything, something that resonates with them. They
Mhm.
need to be invited to something that resonates with them, and then they're going to feel successful.
Mm.
If they're going to the wrong invites, the ones that don't feel good for them, or they're trying to invite themselves to everything, they're going to feel bitter, really bitter about life. And then that kind of goes into their penetrating aura, which does not feel good and does not give them the right invites, right?
So can you almost like tell who you are without going, if I have tanked energy, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm, that generator feeling. If I'm feeling bitterness. So you're basically telling me, yeah, what the byproduct is if you're not living in your sovereignty.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay.
And also want to point out, like, we're always going to alternate between the two. It's part of life. You move into frustration or bitterness. It's
Mhm.
a sign you need to swing the pendulum the other direction. Okay. It's not like you're a bad person and you're on the
Yes.
wrong track. Okay.
Yes.
It's a feedback system.
But I think that in itself, right there, is a super important piece of information because we read things like an empty tank, feelings like bitterness as, well, clearly I'm a screw up. Your negative, loud voice that we're
Hmm.
using these tools to help calm,
Hmm. Hmm.
just starts having at ya with all of
Hmm.
its
Hmm.
nagging. And
Hmm.
instead, we need to go, oh, wow, I got a little bit of bitterness happening right now. Or, oh, wow, my energy's tanked. There's some way I'm not living in my sovereignty.
Hmm. Hmm.
My gosh. Okay, tell me number three.
Number three would be manifestor. Oh, wait. So going back to projectors, 20% of the population are projectors.
Okay. So we're at
The,
90%.
yes. And
Okay.
so the next one is manifestors.
Okay.
Manifestors are 9%, and they are like a very old type, and they're here to inform. They're here to inform, and they're not here to take orders from anyone. And they have like an urge that they're going to follow to inform. And so their energy, their aura is repelling. So when you meet a manifestor that's really living their type, they're going to have a little bit of a fuck you energy. Like, and depending on how they're living, um it might not even, like, they might not be thinking that at all, okay? But
Right.
it's like almost intimidating, and so it
Okay.
can feel like a fuck you.
Wow.
And if
Because
someone
they,
is really far off their path, it's actually, you're not going to feel that at all. And especially women, it's really hard to be a manifester because that is very countercultural. You get called names, you get called a bitch, you get called like, bossy, you get called a lot of things, but this is literally how they're meant to live. They're really meant to live in their full power, and it is a commanding, respect power kind of
can I
being.
just say that that's what I'm talking about in terms of like if you've been a woman who's a
Mhm,
manifester and you've
mhm,
gone through your life sort of having these negative labels attached to you and like your way of being kind of being told is wrong all the time. And then all of a sudden you come across this beautiful piece of wisdom that says,
mhm,
hang on, sweetheart, you're a manifester. That's why
mhm,
you're all these things. And all of a sudden, for me anyway, when I learn these things, that judgment, that self judgment that has been
mhm,
culturally applied to you dissipates because you've just come into some context and understanding about yourself that
mhm,
allows that lens to clear. So we go
mhm,
right back to that step one, recognizing the patterns in your culture. And like you said about when you hit that fear point and you realize this isn't me, this is the fear. And
mhm, mhm,
I think that you're the way you're explaining this is beautiful. Thank you. Because
mhm,
I hope people listening can understand how when you start to learn new systems, new ideas, new things, it gives you a lens on yourself that can help you release that judgment, that self.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And,
Exactly.
and the self-harm even that you were talking about with your son in school, your kid in
Hmm.
school. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
So
Sorry to interrupt.
the signature, no, I think it's great. The signature for a manifester is peace or anger, which is quite extreme, right? And so I feel like it's for generators, they're the easiest to decondition.
Mhm.
Um, Projectors, it's a little easier as well, but still pretty hard. They're going to want to work because they have so much creative energy. They have that open sacral center, so that's their wise place. But it's going to ask them to do more than they're capable of doing and burn them out. And then
Right.
for a manifester, to move into a place of peace, which is true sovereignty, right? To really accept the wholeness of who they are in that repelling aura. And they manifestors have an incredible impact on humanity. They are also, they have an open sacral center and are incredibly creative. And they are meant to have an impact. And that impact profoundly impacts people on an individual level, but also a collective level, and actually pushes us in new directions we would never go. And I don't think a lot of manifestors understand the impact they have on other people, especially when they get a lot of negative feedback, because people don't like change. They don't like being told what to do,
Yeah.
you know? And informing can feel like being told what to do, but informing could also be educating.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. Are you ready for four?
Yeah. So the last type is a reflector,
Wait, I
and
thought you
a
told me there was.
reflector
Oh.
has a completely open diagram. So every single center is white. They just have little gates going off of each of their, um, well, whatever they have in their chart on their chakras. And so they're meant to work with the moon cycles, that 28-day cycle. And they are great observers of the individuals and the collective. They're also incredibly creative. And they are here to mirror what they see. And often that will come in like creative works. There's two artists, two writers that I know are, I don't know any reflectors personally that I know of, but there's two authors that I know that are reflectors, and they are incredibly amazing. One is Mary Oliver, the
Mm,
poet, and then the other is Margaret Atwood.
wow. Yeah, even just saying their names, you're like, oh, I get that. Yeah.
Yeah.
They can show back to you what's going
Hmm.
on in your culture.
Hmm.
Wow.
Hmm.
So just the percentages you've given us, then that's like 1% of the population.
Yep.
Wow.
Hmm.
I have a question about that. Do you think like we're finding more and more kids hitting our education system and the constructs of it not working for that kid? Do
Hmm.
you feel like maybe these percentages of like 70%, 20%, 9 and 1 are shifting in as these new kids are being birthed and more of them, it's like they're innately not choosing not to fit into the old systems. Like these kids are, I don't know, and we're as a culture finding all these things wrong with them and all these diagnoses of them. Is it just that they're refusing to conform?
No,
Okay.
no. So it's funny that you mentioned that, because part of the human design system, there is like a foretelling, and there's not even it's a foretelling, but it's very obviously clearly happening of the rise in autism, and that's actually a big part of human design. And it is like a genetic mutation that is happening, and I would say due to our technological changes, due to like vaccines, due to there's so many influences that we're putting into our human bodies, like toxins,
Mhm.
that like
Food
it's
that's
just
not
not
food.
sustainable. Like
Yeah.
something's gonna break. And I think the break is happening through a genetic change. And so human design talks about this new child that is kind of genetically evolving our humanity.
Yeah.
And it is the autistic child. And so what we know of it, um, in society today, like as we look at autism, like we look at them like they're handicapped and they're a burden. That is just not true. It's just not true at all. Okay. They are incredibly gifted, and they are, um there's so much more than what is seen with the naked eye. Okay. And so human design gets into that. And this is not my area of expertise, but from what I know, is like they can have, um almost like these telepath, especially like a non-speaking autistic, like telepathic abilities. And it is kind of evolving our human conscious into like a more loving ability, and a more harmonious, like united ability. But to, you know, your and my generation, like they're looked upon as, like rejects, basically, right?
When we go back to that very beginning thing and we talk
Hmm.
about, like we're acculturated, we're conditioned, we're programmed. And then these children are coming into our world that we're trying to be like, you need to be like everyone else for us to feel comfortable. You need to feel like everyone else so that we still belong.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's like as there's more and more of these kids that sort of don't fit for whatever diagnostic label we apply to them, we watch like our generation, right? Try and figure out how they can fit. Try and figure out how they can fit. And yet, if we look at this human design, they're not meant to fit. They're not
Hmm.
meant to fit in the cultural construct that we've created. And
Yeah.
perhaps they're here to help us build the new one.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Goosebumps. Okay, so I
So
want to go
I
back
did
to the
want to
very,
just add one thing.
yeah.
So if you're interested in learning of like some of the possibilities of what this, rise in autism, and specifically non-speaking autistics, the potential it can have on our collective consciousness, there is a podcast called the Telepathy Tapes, and they examine, uh, a wide handful of non-speaking autistics, and they do these incredible tests on them, and it is mind-blowing what they can do, what they see.
I love it. Thank
And
you for
so
sharing that.
I recommend it to everyone. It is like, it blew my mind.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I want to bring us back right to that very first question, guiding people on how to move to your own sovereignty.
Mhm.
And I want, now that you've sort of shared these auras, the energies and the strategies of each one, how does that help us? Like, I know can you ground us down into that idea of like
Mhm.
how this knowledge brings you into your own sovereignty?
So when we're looking at it through the lens of human design, which I think is a great structure to start with, it's called living your experiment. So it is an experiment. What you do is you take your chart, and, I recommend getting a reading, because otherwise it's a little bit complicated, for
It,
someone to just look at it. It doesn't make sense. Um, and when you you get to kind of meditate on what you see there, and you get to try doing things a little bit differently than you normally do, and using what you see in that structure as a starting place to try something different and see how it feels and how that works for you. And as you play with it, you get to be like, oh, like that really worked. But obviously, you need to do it more than once. Like it is a practice. It's not something that you're just like, I'm going to do this thing one time and then I'm good. No, it's called like when you're living life, you make choices every day for the rest of your life. And so it's like, can I come into my own higher alignment? And it doesn't mean being perfect. It means like, if I make this choice today, how do I feel? Where did it take me? Do I like this environment that I'm in? Do I need to move to a different environment? How do these people make me feel? Those are the kind of questions you want to ask yourself. And
Yeah.
through that daily feedback and kind of noting what you've learned in your experiment, you course the direction for your life,
Yeah. My
which is
God.
always changing. It's a daily navigation.
So I come back to Ayurveda because I could have described Ayurveda, the science of life, the experiment to longevity, in the exact same way that you just did. The idea of coming back to the daily choice you make is the sovereign one. The
Mhm,
daily choice you make to sort of like numb out and distract and just like go
mhm,
without sort of giving thought and attention and bringing awareness to your choice, or just slowing down enough that you can have awareness over the fact that you do have a choice.
yeah,
Your Ayurvedic dosha or your human design chart giving you scope, showing you opportunity, pointing out where you probably bump up against this all the time. And you're going, yeah,
mhm,
of course I bump up against that all the time.
mhm,
So it's like, oh, well, what if you did this? Maybe you wouldn't bump up against that anymore. And then you're like, you test it and try it. And you're like, oh
mhm.
my God, all my life, I just kept bumping up against that thing. And
Yeah,
you have
yeah,
clarity on an energy that moves in your body.
mhm, mhm,
Oh, this just dovetails amazingly. And this is what I find so much about these holistic modalities that exist in our world but have been denied, shoved in the carpet, demonized, and everything. And now we're realizing it's because they're powerful.
yeah,
And they bring people into their sovereignty. And a world where people are in their sovereignty is a world way harder to control.
yeah.
Goosebumps.
I know.
Oh, do you have anything to add today, Chelsey?
I have one thing to add. So, when you're like in a long held pattern, the first thing is like to become aware of it. And it can be like a deep rut, right? You've done that route however many times, thousands, right? And so to like get out of that rut, gravity wants to pull you back there, right? And so it can take a little while to get out of a rut, and you might go back into it a few times, and it might be more than a few times. I just want to encourage people, it doesn't matter how much you go back into it. But once you see the pattern and you start to look expansively outside of that pattern, like as long as you're focusing on the outside, it doesn't matter how many times you go back, you will eventually get out of it.
Yeah.
Because deep-seated patterns are the most challenging things, and I think the parts that we give ourselves the most self-hatred around, and anxiety and like bad self-talk. So the more grace and compassion we can give ourselves, um, as we work with some of the really hard things that we want to evolve out of.
I want to echo that wholly. Like it's that idea that the first time we fall right into the pattern and we're all mad and
Hmm.
we're
Hmm.
lost, we're helpless, we're saying it's not my fault that I'm here, and there's a grittiness and an anger to it. And then the second time we fall into the hole, into the pattern, we say to ourselves like, I can't believe I'm here again. Oh my God. But we're
Hmm.
still like, oh, this isn't my fault and the world's mean and everything like that. It still takes us a long time to get out of the pattern. And then as we do, the next time we fall in, we're like, oh my God. And then maybe it
Hmm.
doesn't take us as long. And then for a while, we actually can dodge the pattern. We're like, oh, I see
Yeah.
you. And we walk
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll even choose a new direction. And then what's funny is that we sort of, we go along our way and we've gotten ourselves out of the pattern. And I love
Hmm.
that because
Hmm.
there's lots of patterns where I'm like, I'm out of that one now. That one doesn't happen to me. And then boom, I fall right back in that same hole. And this
Hmm.
time I
Hmm.
just
Hmm. Hmm.
laugh because it's like, oh, sweet Jill, here you are again.
Yeah.
And I can have compassion for myself. I can maybe even giggle. I can ask for help out. So by then, it starts to be easier to get out of the rut. It's not as,
Hmm.
you don't stay there as long. It's
Hmm.
not as devastating to you. It's just sort of like, oh, yeah, here it is
Hmm.
again. Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a landmark. Once it becomes a landmark and not like karma or the gravity that pulls you down, it's just a navigational point from there.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Thank you for this conversation.
Yeah.
I appreciate the lens on life that you bring to our talks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I love talking about this. So it's
I
perfect.
know. I know. Ah, we'll speak to you soon, my friend.
Sounds good.